Gatsby here, and this is where I would put my Dragon Master Magia. With Infinite Forbidden dropping next month and the arrival of Under the Sea threatening everyone's favorite pastime, I think it's time I partake in the rite of passage for all Yugi-tubers and make a video talking about Maxx C. Released February 2011 in Storm of Ragnarok, during either player's turn, send this card from the hand to the grave and it becomes the end phase. And for the remainder of the turn, draw a card immediately after your opponent special summons a monster. When it first came out, Maxx C wasn't played much, often trading only 1-for-1. But over time, even if you don't play Yu-Gi-Oh, you're likely aware that modern combos can teeter on looking like a deck profile at times, leaving the modern opponent with 3 options: decide how many cards you're willing to give your opponent, end your turn, or take the Maxx C challenge by summoning enough times to mill your opponent out. Without a doubt, Maxx C is the most controversial card ever printed in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! In the TCG, it was semi-limited in 2016, Limit 1 in 2017, and ultimately banned entirely in 2018, with most players accepting that despite its power, it probably belongs in a very active volcano. The OCG didn't really share this sentiment, keeping it legal at 3 in the OCG format, but more importantly, keeping it at 3 in the Master Duel format, where with deck building statistics, we're able to determine that Maxx C has an almost 95% play rate across all decks. To give you an idea of how absurd it is that 95% of all decks run a singular card, consider that you're statistically more likely to find someone who believes in a flat Earth than you would be to find a Yu-Gi-Oh player who doesn't believe in Maxx C. But everyone knows Maxx C is broken, and although I want to know what military-grade copium Konami is huffing to keep it off of the ban list, in today's video I want to bring this discussion to other games to find out what are cards that command excessively high play rates in other card games. And here's where I beg for interaction. If you have an example, and I don't mention it due to my limited scope of games I'm vaguely familiar with, let me know in the comments and I'd be super down to make a follow-up video given enough interest. Let's begin with the first TCG I ever played, Magic the Gathering. Specifically a small niche alternative format I used to play in the 2000s, minor format, maybe you've heard of it. It's called Elder Dragon H. Sorry, WotC can't have me saying that, because over the last 15 years, Commander went from being an absolute hood classic to probably one of the most degenerate card games still being played, where the only way to enjoy Commander would be to act like a portion of the card pool just doesn't exist, paired with WotC's arm race against themselves to print the most pushed Commander-centric custom cards, and you have a match made in hell. What wouldn't surprise most players of the format, however, is that the most played card is valued at about $1, Sol Ring, played in 84% of all decks over the last 2 years per EDH Rec. This 1-drop mana rock generates 2 colorless mana, and it turns out having access to 4 mana on turn 2 after mulliganing down to 3 cards is pretty damn strong, compared to its next door neighbor Arcane Signet, who generates 1 mana, or the guy from the country club down the road with Mana Crypt, who generates a difficult to explain bank statement. Sol Ring's ease of access and function make it a must-have for just about any strategy. And if someone in your pod is screeching, Black Lotus is the best card though, just make sure they have their WotC approved proxy before forgetting to invite them to the next FNM. Next, a card game I collected but never bothered actually learning, Pokemon. I was born in the 90s, so yes, I have the region of my brain that can identify Pokemon. Despite that, I never actually learned how to play the TCG outside of the Game Boy Color training wheels. So color me shocked when apparently when I was still listening to the Pokemon to be a Master album at grade school sleepovers, Gen 2 had a card that was so overwhelmingly broken that if you weren't running 4 copies of it, it likely meant that your parents didn't love you enough to buy more Pokemon cards. And that Pokemon is Cleffa. If you have even the slightest understanding of card games, just hear me out. Despite only having 30 hit points, Cleffa is a baby Pokemon, which means if it's in your active zone, your opponent flips a coin to see if they can pop the baby. Where it gets wild is its attack, Eek. A single energy move that, regardless of hand size, shuffles your hand into the deck and you draw a fresh 7. And with its no retreat cost, you're able to cycle it out of the way once you have enough setup to play the game. This card was so good that its design continues to exist in the game through different Pokemon, and if you want a more in-depth review, I would suggest you check out this video by Beast Coast Pokemon, where he provides a bit more insight on the subject. What about the card game I would be playing right now if it didn't have early inventory issues? That's right, Digimon. I played a lot of tabletop sim when this dropped initially, but lost interest when I couldn't find any physical product. Given the color wheel, it's a bit more difficult to choose a single card here, but with the Digimon card game Discord, I think we have a couple of good options. Each of the 5 colors of training are borderline must-haves, provided you're not on too many multicolors, but I did want to focus on singular cards that see a most amount of general play across many decks. So let's talk about EX1 Analog Boy and BT16 Ukamon, because it's hard to talk about one and not talk about the other as they provide similar functions. Analog Boy on play allows you to check the top 3 of your deck for a Digimon and add it to hand while milling the rest, and when a 5 or higher Digimon with Evo materials gets deleted, you can hatch an egg to an empty breeding area and gain a memory. Ukamon is slightly different, allowing you to once per turn when something moves from the breeding area, including itself, to check the top 3 for a Digimon or trainer and add it to hand while putting the rest at the bottom of the deck, and then you hatch an egg to an empty breeding area. It's not hard to see why both of these see a lot of play. They're generic options to find cards off the top of the deck while cheating the breeding phase, putting you ahead on actions. Rushdown strategies looking to play from the breeding area quickly can utilize the effect of Ukamon multiple times, and in strategies like Purple that enjoy playing cards from the trash, Analog Boy is invaluable. Alright, let's go to a game that doesn't require me to say breeding anymore. It's been previously stated that Maxx C acts as a deterrent for what is considered to be a toxic combo-heavy playstyle in the OCG format, but instead, at best, it's a turn-ending trolley question, and at worst, the extra card in the hand after your opponent was able to full set up on turn 1. So let me ask you, are there actually any examples of game pieces that command an almost 100% play rate that actually act as a deterrent? That's right, we're going to talk about Pokemon again, because something has a 99.73% play rate, and although this isn't technically a card game, the soul of competitive Pokemon feels close enough to me, and it was the reason why I wanted to make this video in the first place. Because at a 99.73% play rate, you better fucking believe I gotta know why people are out here saying Snorlax is their queen. Unlike Maxx C, GSC Snorlax acts as a deterrent in 2 different ways. He's a defensive option for special sweepers like Zapdos, Jinx, and Nidoking, while still being a forward-moving tank that can utilize moves like Curse. And then the discussion of a laxless format where Snorlax is banned, trial and error quickly showed that the format would degrade to stall with options like Skarmory and Blissey taking over. For me personally though, this is hands down the best example of what the OCG believes Maxx C is. And if you want a more in-depth competitive perspective on GSC Snorlax, I would suggest you check out BKC's videos that help fill in the gaps for me. No matter the game, there's always a best option, and it's extremely interesting to me to see how different games interact with game pieces that demand high play rates. And as previously mentioned, if the video does well, I would consider making a follow-up video because this was genuinely interesting to look at. But with every major Yu-Gi-Oh event finishing up leading up to the WCQs, the arrival of what many are considering to be a retrain of one of the most powerful Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time coming out in Infinite Forbidden, and the persistence of this eepy bitch and her pet snake, the Yu-Gi-Oh community is waiting on bated breath to see if Konami ever addresses the cucaracha in question.
Newly forbidden. Maxx C. Finally. Here it is. The Earth Insect will be eradicated on this list now. Here it is. What year is this? 2004?
Whatever ends up happening though, at least I'll know that at the end of this month it'll be fun knowing that locking people with Sanctifier will be the least degenerate application of a gimmick puppet going into the next format.